Hello, hello.
Abby, is that your office?
It is.
I like it. Looks
Yeah.
clean.
It's a very welcome to being at a startup office.
Like a
All
hushed
all seven
whisper.
of us.
Hello there.
Robert, you're on holiday. Does that mean I can not make you run the show? Do you need me to run the show? Because I think Josh is also on holiday.
Um, yes. Yes, I'm on holiday. That's why the sun came up in Norway, because I'm on holiday.
I wish the sun was as nice to my holidays, but then again, I live in England, so there's that. Uh, so for context for everyone, I will let Robert off the hook, given that he's on holiday. So we're gonna be working off of this kind of sheet. I'll give it a share so that people can see what's going on. Um, let's see. Hopefully that's what you can see. We've got a few things we can go through, and please feel free to add items to the list that you want to cover. This is a figure out as we go list. So what we'll do is give people a minute or two to still kind of join and add items to the agenda. And then what we'll do is the first thing we try and do every meeting is encourage new people to introduce themselves. So Vishal, I know I've seen you around in the docs. Would be great to hear a bit from you. So we aim for sort of a 1 to 2 minute intro. So we know that doesn't fully fully allow everyone to share everything about themselves, but gives a bit of a taste of what people are working on, why they are joining the group and the calls, what they hope to get from it, that kind of thing. And then what we found is that some people have stories they'd like to tell that are a bit longer and more in depth, and we really want to encourage that. And we'll either have time today or we can schedule it in for the next meeting if people want to tell kind of their platform engineering story or their other experiences in a bit more depth. So yeah. All right. I know, Vishal, you've mentioned your first time. I think we have a couple other new faces, but we can start with you if you want to give a little bit of an intro to you and what brought you here to the working group today.
Sure, sure. Hello, everyone. Vishal here. I'm founder and CTO at a company called InfraCloud Technologies. And brief history, I started as a mechanical engineer, got into programming, did that for a few years, and then got into Google App Engine, Cloud Foundry early 2010s, and then Chef, Puppet, and one thing led to other, and Docker, and then Kubernetes, and here I am, basically. I think we have been speaking to a few customers lately, enterprise customers getting their platform engineering, in order. And that's when I discovered the platform engineering white paper, and I was like, "Hey, something is happening, so let's join and contribute where we can." I am based out of India, but most of our customers are based in US, and then a few Indian banks is also something we are working with. And our entire focus is all infrastructure technologies, from bare metal to Kubernetes, whatever it takes. But infrastructure is what we focus on. Yeah, that's a very brief intro about me and the company, so to speak.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. It sounds like you're definitely in the right place based on what you're working on and you're interested in. So glad to have you on board. Dominic, I don't know if I've seen your face here before. You also a first timer.
Yeah, not yet. I'm also
Great,
first
welcome.
timer, right? I am Dominic. I'm a product manager working for Giant Swarm, and Puya works there as well. So he explained me a bit what you're doing here, and so I directly sparked my interest in it. As we in Giant Swarm are doing platform engineering and support our customers with creating their own platform engineering journey, basically. I'm very interested in this topic and looked through the white paper and now a bit into the concept for the maturity model, and I liked it very much. So I wanted to see if I can help some way.
Amazing. Getting more product owners and product managers for these things in is awesome. Kirsten is nodding vigorously as a fellow product person. So it's good. Very good. Matthias, I saw your comment, so I will not, if the internet is such that it doesn't make sense for you to do your intro today, we're happy to do that another day, but just want to open the floor in case you want to say hi. I don't want to discourage it. All right, I'm going to assume internet's not quite there today, and that's totally fine. So, awesome. I think those are all of our new faces. The one downside to this process is that obviously you all don't quite get to get the intro to all of us, but that will come out naturally, hopefully over time. And I know I've had some short chats with new joiners, just introing myself and what we're up to. So if that's something you all want to do, encouraged to reach out and do those kinds of chats. So what I think is a really good use for this meeting is to have a look at what is currently in progress, and therefore people can jump in where they see opportunities, and there's asks out for help. And then obviously if there's things that you want to do that are not yet in progress, figuring out how we can support and encourage that work as well. So we've got a lot to do. As a super high level reminder, we are trying to be intentional about shaping our work for the level of kind of visibility or impact of it. And so we're okay with the fact that any one thing that we publish is not going to be perfect for everyone, but we want things to speak to each other. So the white paper being sort of at the top level of hierarchy, height, depth, whatever, and then kind of the maturity model giving a little bit more concrete detail. And then what we're expecting is that there'll be much more detailed publications that come off the back of that. So for example, I know we have a platform as a product paper that people are passionate about getting out into the public. And I think I've heard about things around metrics and measuring platforms that people are passionate about. And so I think that we'll get some of those more detailed things out in due time. So talking about what's in WIP. So the first thing I want to call out is that we have very excitingly had a contribution to bring internationalization to the TAG website. So this is that we have a website for the entire technical group, the TAG, which is app delivery. This is just one working group within that TAG. There's also operators and GitOps and a few others. So we have internationalization. I've done a quick review. I noticed an issue with some of the translations, but that's been fixed. So from my kind of quick review, this feels like that this is a step forward and a positive one, and we should look to merge it. So maybe actually, Robert, as I think you have rights on the repo, so maybe something that you could look at when you get a moment and see if we can merge that in.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that issue, and I'm just looking through and checking stuff, but it seems that
do a proper review of it. I'm just saying I've done a quick assessment, and it seems like things aren't broken, which is like step one, right? We're looking to always roll forward, right? So
I just have to go through and click on everything.
Yes, please do. Please do.
Right.
I selfishly did more things on the working group platforms than anything else. So please do give a proper look through before you approve. But that's just a heads up that that's there. I might actually suggest before that, as a part of that, we maybe talk about next steps for the website. It's a nice lead on from that. So sorry, were you the one that added that as a action item? Or
I am.
Yeah.
I was the one.
What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it is a good kind of roll into. I know that we've been kind of having dialogue over the last few times about the prototype platforms, and for context, people that don't know what that's about. Basically, there's an idea that's out there that it may be useful for us not to just have like to kind of stop at maturity model or white paper, but to have practical examples of what it can look like to be at a certain type of role within a organization that's implementing platform engineering, and to have like the example of like this is what it looks like to what's a good example to what am I thinking? To combine like cross-plane and backstage together to create like a specific type of platform for someone that's trying to achieve this purpose, right? That's just me pulling something out of thin air. But the idea remains the same, where we're trying to find different like practical examples. I think the link that, that's in there kind of explains a bit more. And there's quite a few people that have sort of focused on this subject, whether it's Mauricio or some other people. And so kind of we've been kind of talking about using the website as a place for some of these examples of platform prototypes to be able to live that the community can consume. Did I hit that well? Did I encompass that? Okay.
Absolutely. I think this is an example of where, as we say, we're going to do things at different levels of abstraction.
Mhm.
And this is a very kind of implementation specific thing that we want to refer back to the higher level concepts in like the white paper and things like that. But this is the right place to be talking about CNCF tools and other tools and implementation choices. So yeah, absolutely.
That said, I think the conversations we've had up to this point, I think what the end of this dialogue is kind of connotating is instead of trying to like do a bunch of work like curating the content that would go, kind of just throwing it out there and then slowly sort of building in a bit more processes and refining it. So now that the website has been created and merged, I think it's worth sort of kind of proceeding and talking through kind of what this part would start to kind of look like.
It might be worth for people who haven't seen the website before, what Asari's referencing here is that
Mhm.
we have recently merged a change which puts working groups as a kind of top level item, which didn't exist before. And now we have a drop down list within each of the working groups. And so the idea here is that the working groups should have a lot of autonomy over what they present inside these drop downs. So right now, all that has happened is the previous content that was previously on the website, which was pretty much just charters and white papers, have been slotted into the correct locations. But that has unleashed now each of the working groups to have ownership and autonomy. So we have the ability now to restructure what comes in underneath platform's working group title here. And there's one of the first things people are interested in doing is introducing something around prototypes under there. So yeah. So is there any, on that note, is there any like call to action here that you like specifically feel like we need to get insights into or ideas into?
Yeah, I think it may be worth that. It may not be here that this needs to be done, but I think just kind of, especially since Leanne's not here. But I think it'd be worth it to have like a separate meeting with Leanne and seeing how we can start to kind of like format out something like this and what just like a smorgasbord of prototypes could hypothetically look like, and then maybe have some type of call to action for, hey, like if you've got some prototypes that you'd love to showcase via the working group, let's do it. Let's get you in there and see how you can add your content.
Awesome. Yeah, that seems like a good thing. I think if you want to be involved in that, what can we expect?
Mhm.
Maybe a post in Slack as well
Yep.
as
Yeah, I can
call
start
yourself
pushing
out
that
on the
forward.
doc. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can start kind of pushing that forward. Maybe I can reach out to Leanne over the Slack channel and kind of say like, hey, like, would you be open to just having like a separate like dialogue concerning the subject, and whoever wants to join that's interested in the subject can join, and we can kind of talk through different options,
Cool.
and then kind of go from there, like whatever actions result from that meeting.
Yeah, I
if
think
you want to include me, that's an area I'd like to contribute as well. We chatted with Leanne a little bit about that, but just didn't get, we were all busy at the time and didn't really get momentum on it. It's a good chance to bubble it back up. But I'm also happy to, I know she prefers meeting asynchronously on some stuff, but I'm happy to get into a call.
She does.
I
she
work
does.
better that way, like getting into a call if you do as well, but
Yeah, I do too. And I think especially just for the start, just so that we're all on the same page about this is just where we're going. And then from there, we can just go async. I'll reach out and
Right.
see if she's comfortable with that. But if not, then yeah, we can probably try to work it out asynchronously. It just may be a lot of messages on the thread.
Yeah.
yeah, it just helps me prioritize time and sync, like get focused and flow on it.
I will say that you can create channels in the CNCF Slack, and if we want to create a channel that is named in such a way that is discoverable and maybe clearly accessible from the working group's channel, so something like working group platform prototypes or something like that, so it's like people can realistically find it, then maybe that's a short-lived channel that makes sense. But the other thing I was just going to say is for some of our newer joiners that are on the product side, this is, I would say that the majority of the people that have been involved with this initiative to date are people who are on the engineering side looking to kind of engineer solutions. And one of the reasons why it's been maybe slow to have uptake is there's been questions around how much should we clarify the higher level questions and the higher level like intentions of a prototype versus just being like, here is some tech. And I think there's a goal to not slow down the tech while still encouraging discussion around that higher level. Like, how do you talk about what a platform should provide? Like, what are the business cases around it and that kind of thing. So this is an area that is not purely technical or doesn't need to be purely implementation if you're interested in getting involved. So
I think it is also important that we don't like that we make sure it's seen as a prototype and not as a this is our like default implementation of a platform. I think there's a big risk in pushing any components as a default expectation.
I think that's one of the concerns that's been raised and why we want to make sure that any process we put in to put prototypes on the website is such that anyone could add one and that they are very clearly exemplars, not held up as anything more than that. So, and that's, I think, also why there's been a push for a conversation about like, what does a good prototype entail? Like how much description of what it's trying to achieve does there need to be? How much description of the trade-offs that it surfaces or that it makes needs to be? Like those are the conversations that I think were being raised, and we were trying to figure out how much to do those up front versus how much to do those as we start seeing prototypes come in, and then we can start to standardize across them. So yeah, very good point, Dominic. Yeah. Yeah, any other questions or comments or calls to action around the website stuff before we move on? Cool. All right. Then gonna pop back up and have a look at maturity model quickly. So this has been a big piece of work we picked up basically coming out of Amsterdam, where we released the white paper. This is the idea that the white paper got legs quite quickly, to be honest, excitingly quickly. And a lot of people were like, cool, now what? And the maturity model is an attempt to help people ground themselves on the intentions behind the white paper. So where we stand on that is that we have done some really good deep dive work on the model itself, I'll call it, the table, the like kind of screenshotable, conference talkable table. And we're now working through the where to go from there. So let me see if I don't have any links to it. Oops, sorry.
Which one are you looking for?
I was just gonna look for the version 0.2, like kind of the newest version. Do you have that? Just add a link here in the doc by any chance. Awesome, thank you. So yeah, so we've done some deep dives. What we've resulted in is I'm calling it fairly stable, though not finalized, version of the table. So that is this document here. And it has some information in the kind of contributing guide and things. This is very much still a work in progress. But what we have basically come to is enough of a confidence in this table that we want to start detailing out the details, without for lack of a better word, behind each of these kind of items within the table. And so the piece of work that we're doing right now is that there is either a person or a pair of people that have picked up each of the aspects, so each of the rows on the table: investment, adoption, interface, operations, and measurement. And they have edit rights to the permissions to the document of their aspect and are starting to add details to it in whatever fashion they see fit to work through that. We, of course, need this to be a coherent singular document. So we have some high level kind of intentions for how we want to do the details, but these will evolve as we learn, right? These are sort of just trying to help people get on the same page. So giving a sense of we're not writing multi-page documents in details. These are kind of, we're looking for a few sentences to a small paragraph. But we want a few sentences to a small paragraph for each level within it. And we want to make sure that each level is considered a point in time that provides both challenges and positives, and that there are growth within it. You don't have to get to level 4 before you get something positive. Yeah, and talking about the abstraction level, we don't want this to be, if you use tool X, you are level 3. And if you use tool Y, you have progressed to level 4. It's not about the tools you use, it's about the outcomes you get. And yeah, and so if we open up like one of the examples, this is, I think, sorry, I think this is one you're working through. This is as sort of the lead on it. This is sort of, work in progress right now. So a little bit of kind of brainstorming and information gathering, and then it's going to get refined into paragraphs. And our goal right now is to get these get at least some amount of information in them for discussion, into all of them for discussion by next Tuesday, when we have an opportunity for a synchronous chat on the detailed sections, so that we can kind of get a quick sync between people. And then the goal is to get these into a relatively stable position by September 10th, which is when we are aiming to open up for sort of formal review of the entire document via GitHub, to allow us time to be able to review, refine, and publish before Chicago. So call to actions are, if you would like to review any of the detailed sections and jump in, please do. Everyone can comment and suggest on any section, but there are people who will help kind of guide that process. And if you want to be a part of that, please shout. In most cases, we could use an extra person. So if there's one you're particularly passionate about, let me know. And then the other thing that is a call to action is that this intro section is also sort of in the refinement phase going into that September 10th target stabilization period. So all of this is very work in progress. It's going to become harder to make big changes when we get into GitHub. So the idea is that this is the time when we should be hearing the feedback that's going to be revolutionary or extensive, and hopefully incorporating that prior to September 10th. So does that make sense? Any questions or concerns on that?
What is on September 10th?
It's a date I pulled out of the air. Dominic, you ask all the hard questions. I like having you here. No, genuinely, it's a date I pulled out of the air based on I don't know if you've heard the term swag before, scientific wild ass guess. But based on the effort that Josh did with publishing the white paper, leading the publishing of the white paper coming into Amsterdam, I sort of worked backwards from Chicago and allocated time accordingly. And so September 10th is a general date where, if we can find ourselves in a good position, that would give us about a month of more formal review of the model before we would be able to take a go, no go call on whether or not we want to publish before Chicago. So yeah.
Thanks.
No worries. It's a reasonable ask. And yeah, I guess it's what's on the screen here is these are the ideas. So if we have, if we open it for review in GitHub, that would mean that we'd be calling attention to it by people within the CNCF in different groups and things like that to give us review. That would give us about a month of that final review. And then that would give us about 2 weeks to sort of get the PDF created, create the marketing for it, etc., coming into Chicago. So that's our general timeline. Yeah. We have a few people who are leading some of these. If you have any questions or asks for within your detailed section, this is a good time to call that out.
More of a shameless plug than anything. We've got a working session on Thursday. So if you're looking to contribute to the investment section, definitely come through. The information is on the tag site, I believe. Yeah, it's also there. There you go.
Yep, and that's the link, and then there's also, and that'll add it to your calendar. And there's also a link to the next Tuesday deep dive if that's something you're interested in joining into. And there's videos of all the previous deep dives in the working group Slack. So if you're interested in kind of how it works or what we'll do before committing to spending time with us all, feel free to take a look at those. Ping me if you need to find those links if those aren't obvious. Happy to share them. Yeah. Right. Any other, so we've got another half an hour of the call, and so we can dive into some details on some stuff, but I just want to first make sure that there's no other kind of action items, agenda items, things people want to talk about at like a higher level before we dive into any details behind something. So does anyone want to talk about anything else from like a working group kind of height conversation?
Wait, sorry. I see the links now to the details for the info on each aspect. How do I see who kind of owns each one? Or I guess maybe I don't have to think too much about who owns it. I can kind of get in there and try to, yeah, contribute, ask some questions or see where it's at.
That's a great question. So two things. So first of all, I will send a link to where it is in the Slack. Hold on, copy link. So the so that's in the Slack. You can if you're logged into the CNCF Slack, that is the list of who's owning it. You also probably can see it in like who it's shared with. So you might be able to see like, I don't know if you can or not actually. So it
Maybe you
doesn't
can see
show.
the
Never
updates.
mind. So
Okay.
yeah, but in Slack, or just give a shout in Slack if you have questions. But more importantly, I would be happy to reinforce the point of like, don't stress. And like the only reason to worry about that is if you are like, I would love to pair with someone on this, then of course getting to know who's involved will be beneficial. But everyone should feel empowered and encouraged to jump in with comments, questions, whatever, for any of these. They are all owned by the entire working group. It's just that for ease of like change management, having a few people who are like making sure we get progress on it, making sure that everyone's getting their voices heard, it's just a bit easier, I think, to have certain people with edit rights. But yeah, please suggest, please comment. No limitations there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert, for holding down the chat. I just noticed there's a bunch of questions in there, but they look all answered. Cool. All right. Well, then what I would suggest is opening the floor for people who are in the depths, in the weeds a bit on the maturity model or on any other piece of work if they want to do an impromptu bit of a session now or answer any questions. This would be a great time to do that. So I think I saw something around guidelines in the chat that, as a question, like this would be a good time to do that. Yeah. So does anyone want to workshop anything quickly while we're all here?
Have a quick one. Are you, I'm going to go to the Cartographos meeting after this today. So
Fantastic.
let me know if you're wanting to go to that, or if you want me to just send you a report.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it today if it's after this. I have to
I'll send
head
you a
out.
report.
Yeah, sorry. And so for context for everyone else, Cartographos is the group that produces the cloud native maturity model, which is a much higher level maturity model than what we're doing. But we're trying, just like we're trying to create things at differing levels of abstraction within our working group, they want to encourage that within all of the CNCF. So they have quite a high level maturity model around cloud native adoption, and they see platforms as something that will slot into certain aspects of that maturity and at certain levels of that maturity. And we want to make sure that our language is such that that works together, and that we have the right hook points where inside their maturity model they'll link out to our white paper and to our maturity model and things like that. So that's why we're collaborating with them. So if that's something, if you're interested in that sort of higher level maturity model, grab Colin for a Slack chat or whatever. He's a good person to talk to about that. All right, well then, if no one else has anything, I think one thing that may be worth talking about is we have 2 suggested edits to the table. So they say this is stabilized, but it's not finalized. So in the sense that we expect that as people are detailing out their sections, they may see inconsistencies or misalignment of levels and call that to attention. They're going to become more of the experts in each of these aspects basically as they go. So sorry, do you want to talk a little bit about the investment one that you want to bring up?
Yeah, so the 4 stages. So we've got a technical instrument, technical cost, product. What does that say there? Here, I'll open up my own screen too. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Product budget and profit center. So the reason I didn't love voluntary or temporary is because the other 3 sort of align, like they're all nouns, right? They're all like things that you can tangibly like have, right? Like you have a technical cost center, like something like a product budget or profit center, but voluntary or temporary is more of a description than anything. So I like the idea of like trying to hit that same concept while still putting like a thing to it. Is with like something like a tactical instrument, so something that achieves a short-term goal, but does not necessarily bring you to like how we are achieving like larger overarching goals that the company's initiatives have, or and so I think it kind of hits that short-sightedness of what like a tactical instrument is, kind of like having like a hammer that explodes after you hit the nail in. You know, it's in the wall. It's done. No longer useful. It's just boom. Like it may evaporate or it may hang around, right, in smithereens, and it doesn't really do much from there. Hopefully that metaphor made sense, but that's why I kind of put something like that. I'm open-minded to it not to another word being used. But that's why I chose that one.
Anyone have any reactions to that, one way or the other?
Yeah, I agree with the concept, but I'm not sure about the word. But I don't have any better word, so I have to think about that.
Yeah, I think it's something that needs to be thought about, because I agree. I don't love tactical instrument. It doesn't sound Like, I've never heard anything like that. I
Yeah,
guess I'm inventing something new here, but yeah, I think something that illustrates it, I think would be good.
yeah, and that's kind of the main thing for me. It's not something when I read it, I just don't understand what it is based on the words itself. So like if it the other words that are used in the table in general is very self-explanatory when you read it. But I agree that like voluntary or temporary probably aren't the best things to use. So maybe you need to find something better. I just don't
Maybe
know
the
what
word
that is.
instrument is kind of throwing it off. Maybe it's tactical tool is better or something that, because I think people understand the idea of something being tactical instead of strategic. Um,
I
so I
do
think it's kind of just figuring, yeah.
with tactical, I do think technical cost center has tactical
That's
aspects
true.
to it. It's
Good
not,
point.
I do think I can definitely see the word tactical being used at this level. So I'm not saying that it's like a blanket, oh, that's already covered by level 2. But I do think like, I wonder if there's something else that's, yeah, I think continue to think on it. One of the things I just was thinking about is you just did a great explanation of like what triggered the change. And I tried to capture that in a comment here, but if you want to add anything more to this like chain of comments of like what the characteristics of the word you're trying to think of would be, and it might like encourage creativity in someone else, like, oh, I want it, to emote the idea of voluntary and temporary, but have these characteristics, have it be more aligned to the structure of the other 3 or whatever. You said it well, basically. And if you want to throw something into that might help people think through other options, that can work there.
Maybe one idea with what you said, like it's, temporary and stuff like that. Maybe it's a project cost, which would directly trigger like it has an end, it's just temporary, and if it's done, it's done.
Yeah, I
I
like
do
the idea
like
of
that,
that. It
yeah.
kind of hits the other, it fits a little bit better with the other ones. Because I think technical cost center, that at least that kind of connotates like not necessarily that there's like a specific end date that, but still that this is an expense. This isn't something that we're seeing as like an asset. This is like a liability that we're dragging along with us, this platform. So I kind of like the idea of having something like a project. I think the issue with project is that doesn't, I think we'd have to really like explain it within description, which is what the description's for. But I'm not sure if it'd be really easy for someone to intuitively know, oh, I see why that's level 1. That's very obvious that project is not great. Projects seem like good, like I like projects. We all have projects. So yeah, it's kind of a tricky one.
Maybe that's the the problem with product managers. We explain products and projects all the day. For me, it's very clear. But yeah, I was just coming from the idea of, it's something that I just like in the provisional state, in the first state of it, I just want to pay for it once in the best case. So one-time bill or something, but that sounds weird. So project, I think, is the closest.
Yeah, I think the cost center already is some form of institutionalization, right? And in the provisional place, we have no institution yet at the company, right? It's more like it might pop up somewhere. It might be, I don't know, the digital experience layer where they're like, oh yeah, we need this. We just do it, right? And we invest in it. And at some point you're like, ooh, yeah, maybe this needs to be more centralized, operationalized, and then.
I think that's, in my opinion, that's grasped the difference between the 2 levels really well. Like in the sense that like technical cost center is often quite tactical still, but it is more centralized, it is more long-lived, it is more tracked. And that's why it's operationalized versus level 1 is more like who's got the energy today, who's got the passion today, who's feeling the most pain today, and is therefore going to take some sort of action to reduce their personal pain or their improve
It
their
might not even
personal
be their
problems.
job, right?
Exactly. And so I think, yeah, so I think you've captured that right. And now it's just like, what word does that? Like what? And
So hard.
I would definitely agree that voluntary or temporary is something that could absolutely be captured in the details rather than be at the table level. So I'm not, yeah. So I think it's like, this is what I mean by the people who are digging into the details. Like Asari was there when we settled on this as the table, and yet when he was sitting there looking at the detailed section was like, oh, actually this doesn't, now that I'm really zoomed in just on this
Exactly.
aspect, it doesn't quite work. And I think it's a great shout. And so now it's trying to think through what that better top level word might be. Yeah, so what I was putting in is like, I was gonna maybe edit is like tactical projects, or like it's almost like passion projects is like sort of the what it is, right? At this level. Like, or something dis like disconnected projects. Like there's something like that isn't quite right either, but that's all like that's all emoting the right feeling. And now it's just like, but what is the thing, right?
I mean, in the worst case, we could say shadow organization.
Yeah, that's what you're getting a lot of at that level, right? But I guess you could get shadow at all levels, if you're not doing it quite, or not maybe at level 4, because the whole point is level 4 you shouldn't incur it. Like it should be so responsive that you're not getting that shadow as much. But I think realistically, shadow is something that's feedback to you, right? When you're building your platforms. I think it's a great term. And I could definitely see that coming up in a lot of the detailed sections. It's that conversation. Cool. So that is, keep chewing on that is what I would suggest. I'm just gonna call out one of the other ones where we have a suggestion so that we can get that on people's minds as well, as we go. So one of the principles, and we talked about, it came up in comments about principles, like one of the principles was we want this table to be durable. Now, there's a chance that the day after this publishes, we learn something new, which means that this table would ideally change. So I'm not saying it's above reproach, but the idea is we want to use language in this table where the chances that it needs to change in the next 6 to 12 months is very low. Whereas in the detailed section, the chances it needs to change in about a year because we've learned better about process and technique and things is more likely, though maybe not like definitely. And so I think Marsh was calling a great question around the durability of API contracts and whether or not that is sneaking in the idea of a technique or a tactic. Like that contracts is a technique or a contract versus what the outcome, which is really what we're trying to aim for at this table level, is a robust API or set of robust APIs. And I thought that was a very good shout. I don't know. What do people think about the shift in that language or something else altogether?
It reads definitely a lot better in like when you read through the line also, right? It's again a noun.
Mm-hmm.
And it works good for me.
I've been curious on the use of API versus the use of contracts, because we all think very, very, very technically about this in a lot of cases. And if I was reading through this, I'd associate API with this is entirely automated. It's only systems that are communicating with actual APIs between each other, versus the concept of like an API as a contract, or an abstraction of like APIs can still be people interacting with each other through policy or something like that. And that's something that I've been thinking about when I saw the shift back to APIs.
It's funny that you say that because I had a conversation with Marsh about that exact subject a couple weeks ago, and he said the exact same thing. I wish he was here. I think he would have agreed with what you just said. So I think it does get a bit tricky of like we don't want to box ourselves into like always computer to computer interactions or things like that, but rather it's really just the people behind the computers that are the biggest component to the interface. That the humans drive the why behind why we're having whatever dialogue or why we are engaging in whatever promises or deliveries, whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's something worth asking. I totally agree.
I wasn't too deep in the previous discussions here, but in what kind of put up a question for me is, like, for me already at a self-service point, behind the self-service, most probably there's APIs. And I'm not sure how to interpret then the next step towards level 4 being robust APIs. Is that more towards we have more stability in our API, a better change process, no breaking changes, or like what is the actual benefit for the platform towards the user? Because towards the user, the self-service is enough. What happens behind the self-service is not really important. Towards the platform team, I am seeing customers or end users actually working towards, oh, we have self-service, but in the background, we're doing it all by manually pushing some Terraform. If that would be automated, or is that the automation step?
This is something that also I'm struggling a little bit with, because for me, as soon as your platform is self-service, that for me is kind of the top of the maturity model in my head. And I'm kind of struggling a little bit about like abstracting that, because what it was before, there was templating and golden path and self-service APIs. That was kind of like the two top ones, and I remember them being reversed. So it was kind of like self-service and then templating, which is wrong in my head again, because it's the more self-service you are, the more mature you are. And I'm also struggling a little bit with the idea of having something that's very like API contracts, robust APIs, if self-service is not like the top level, that kind of doesn't make sense to me, and the way that I think of platforms and how mature they are in the interface section. So
maybe. Oh, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that's basically just it. And I've been thinking about that ever since for a long time, but I haven't been able to kind of or I'm not sure how to express that in another way than that. Hope that makes sense.
Maybe a thought from my experience was I kind of see self-service as still needing quite a lot of action from the end user. And you did mention Golden Pass here, but we don't, I mean, Golden Pass, the name is kind of a bit, the phrase might be a bit too loaded, but giving more capabilities like out of the box without having to like plug them together actively is for me kind of the next step. First you're bespoke, then you get supported, then you might have some kind of self-service, but at some point you get a very good out of the box experience without having to actively pull in like, oh, I need a database as a service. I need, I don't know, all these things. I need a supply chain, a secure supply chain, but it's just there, right? There's like, I don't know, progressive rollouts are just there in the process instead of me having to kind of pull it together out of different services that are maybe self-service, but still not interconnected into full capabilities.
I really like that. I think that there's kind of two angles maybe of maturity that we're talking about here, and maybe this only covers one, and maybe we want to think of a way to cover both. So let me see if I've clocked what's going on here. But I think with self-service, one thing to Colin's point is sometimes we think really technically, and I don't think, in my opinion, self-service is not always an API. Self-service is I don't have to ask for help. I don't have to right? And that could just be very good run book. That could just be like an exemplar template that I can use, right? It's not specific versus where I think, so this is one angle of the maturity that I think we're talking about. This is the one that's maybe trying to be captured here more specifically, is the change from I don't need help to I don't need to worry about it. So I don't need help because I have really good runbook on how to create a database in the cloud using Terraform, self-service. I don't need to worry about it. I've made an API request and someone's given me back a connection string and I'm done with my life. I don't need to worry about how that database gets updated. I don't need to worry about where it's running. I don't need to worry about it scaling. I don't need to worry about anything to do with it because it's behind a contract that says I've got myself a database that I can use. And I have the things I care about, which is that it's a SQL database and it's secured for PCI data and I can connect to it. That's all I care about. That's my contract with, whoever's providing me that database, right? So I think that's one thing that we maybe try to capture here, but what I'm hearing and I think is really important to also capture is this idea of like individual services that might be self-service or might be behind a contract with somebody else versus an interconnected ecosystem of services where it's like I no longer have to worry about connecting my database to my like web app because it just sort of they know how to talk to each other or whatever, right? Like whatever the services are that talk to each other. I don't need to worry about my pub sub to my data store to my whatever because everything just sort of knows like is interconnected and comes together as a package and has that sort of golden path. And to your point, Pooja, I know that it's a little bit overloaded, but we can use that here as a shortcut, even if we don't want to codify it into the table.
So maybe, as you mentioned it, like you explained it really well. I really like that explanation. So maybe the API is like the word API in there is a bit too much, but it's more about, it feels like it's like the capability as a service, right? It's not, it's, like if I do an API call or like however I'm requesting it, I'm getting it as a service. I don't need to worry about it, right? And so it's one step more than just self-service. Because the APIs make it too technical again. Like I know we all are very technical, it seems.
Yeah, on the so we say self-service solutions, and that kind of goes back to the capabilities as well. We know people as they go through their platform maturity, they're going to add new capabilities, and it was more clear in the more expansive maturity model draft. But I see that on personally on the level 3 there. I have some self-service solutions. Like I might not have complete capability coverage based on what my organization needs. And then the 4th is like I have some sort of complete coverage with a depth of integration required to make this robust and something like that. But that's kind of how I read it a little bit too. It's not like all of your capabilities are self-service and then that's level 3 and it goes beyond that. I was reading that as I've got self-service solutions that work. And then level 4 is kind of like brought everything together.
Amount of coverage is very interesting, but I want to hear from you, Dominic, before jumping into that further from my side.
For me, I just wanted to drive it away from any technical, but just saying self-service for me is a Subway where you go into and then you can select whatever thing you want on your sandwich and you have a huge collection. But what I really want in the last stage is I just go into a shop and I tell them what I like as a taste and then I get it perfectly integrated. So I think the word already dropped with like the integration part. I think that is the significant one. So maybe it's a highly integrated self-service in its last stage because it's at the end it's still self-service. I think that's a really important thing. But it's also like it's even one step more. It's one thing less to worry about.
Yeah, and I agree with that because what you Abby described, it can be self-service if you have templated solutions and kind of everything at the get-go. But what I don't feel that is kind of self-service. I feel that's still just templating and kind of you still would have to be a technical person being involved doing stuff. Like you can't just go and order a new environment. You would have to set that up, but there might be automation around it. But at that point, it's not really self-service. It's just basically fully automated templating. Self-service for me is literally if you go to the Amazon Azure or Google Cloud and say, I need a virtual machine, I need a Kubernetes cluster, and then everything's happening at the platform level. Either through some sort of, it might be an API, but it might be a CLI tool, it might be a portal. That doesn't matter, but you kind of just describe what you need, and that happens on the platform. That is for me kind of like the top level. How to describe that? In any other way, I don't really know, but I feel that if you're putting APIs in here, people that are technical are gonna assume that means you sit there and send in something to an API and then stuff happens. That is automatically what I thought, was the thing. And for me, that's not the most mature. It's part of the process. It might be part of the offering, but that's not really a really mature self-service solution in my head.
Yeah, I think a lot of that really resonates for me. I think definitely at this point, we're all agreed API isn't quite the right word, which is a really good shout by sort of like that has been driven by Marsh raising concerns and then in this conversation. So I think we need to step away from APIs in the word. That's clear, and has agreement. I think one thing I would definitely challenge back, Robert, on whether or not self-service should be the term for the top level, in the sense that, like, I think self-service, this is what this group gets to debate and create an alignment on, right? So this is just my opinion, but in my opinion, I think conflating self-service as in autonomy, as in I don't need to rely on other people, with something as a service, which is I think what you said, Pooja. That resonated with me when you said that. I think are slightly different concepts, and I think we have an opportunity here to dissect the two, because when we look at the levels that we're talking about, something scaled needs to be something that you don't need hand-holding, you don't need support. It doesn't specifically mean that you have that sort of on-demand managed service behind it, right? That would be, in my opinion, that's a really good differentiator between scaled and optimized. At scaled, I, as a single platform engineer, can support hundreds of application engineers. That means I can scale. I might not be able to optimize that until I can look at what's a managed service that I can continue to support hundreds of application engineers while managing their databases for them. Like, that is like a whole nother kind of steep curve to get to. I don't know. That's just my read on those two things.
I agree, but at the same time, the aspect we're talking about is the interface aspect. So just going straight to, basically platform as a service type offerings, that for me is not an interface. The interface would be self-service, even if the underlying thing that you're ordering is a packaged solution, or if it's singular components. So again, this is why I kind of like, for me on the interface side, having something that's fully self-service is kind of the top level. Like what you're getting out of it might not be as mature, but like that's the interface for the platform. In that context, for me, self-service is full on the most mature, and then you would have some sort of like template or even golden paths, because at that point you would still kind of get pointed in the direction in a technical term and would have to do stuff and be involved while self-service is totally hands-off.
And that's definitely where I think operationalized supported solutions is sort of that templating. And so in my opinion, that's where that's captured. What you're, I think, raising, and I think is a really interesting point, is whether or not that's at the wrong level, right? It's like potentially there's like that's actually level 3 and level 4 is self-service and so forth. And I think, I don't know, we're now a minute over, so I'm just gonna like call that out and say like these are the conversations we want to be having. And I'm really glad that we took some time to do this today. I think it does take some time to chew on this. I think there's still some things left to discuss on what we want to achieve, do we have exact alignment yet on what we think the levels should be? I think I see a little bit of challenging there of like, what we want it to emote, as I've said. But I think this is all really good conversation because we're narrowing in on alignment and we're identifying where there's interesting debates to be had and to come with solutions. So come back for more next Tuesday. And please comment in the document if you have other ideas that pop into your head for, well, any of the squares, but in particular the 2 that we were able to talk about today seem to be ones that we want to improve on. So yeah, this has been really good. I really appreciate everyone in engaging with it and all of that. Is there any other things people want to say before we close out for today and go back to asynchronous work till next week?
Awesome job, Abby. You're killing it.
As long as I'm not actually killing the maturity model, like I want to keep that alive and well. Yeah, no, this has been, I think we've said this many times. The exciting part about being part of this group is these discussions. All of the people who read this, all they get is the output, and there's a lot of value to be had there. But I personally have found that these discussions are the reason to be a part of the group and to get involved. So, yeah, hope to see you through in the different. We've got Thursday where Asari's gonna be leading us through talking about investment, and next Tuesday where we'll be talking about the table as a whole. Again, that sort of alignment on consistency across the detailed sections. So, hope to see you there.
Yeah. If anyone is going to be at CVO Navigate in a few weeks, some of us will be. I'm there a day early so that I don't get screwed by flights the way that flying is right now. But I'd be happy to sit down and do a working session on that Monday beforehand if anyone's interested.
I'm in town. There's an AWS event that day, Colin. If you don't have anything better to do, you can come listen to me talk again. I do that.
I am fine with that. Shoot me some info.
I will, definitely. Cool.
All right.
Well, then thank you all, and look forward to seeing you on another working group call. Find us in the Slack if you have any questions or comments or anything. Just find us in the Slack.
See you.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a great day, y'all.